And welcome to the China Mining Club in association with VSA Capital. I'm Andrew Monk, Chief Executive of VSA Capital, and delighted to have with me George Roach, the CEO and founder of Premier African Minerals. George, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Andrew. Just going a bit stir crazy with this lockup that we've got, but I'm sure the same applies to you and many of your viewers as well.
Yeah, the lockup's pretty bad, and of course, I'm afraid South Africans are getting blamed over here for the South African variant of COVID. It's pretty bad. Every country seems to have its own variant, and the badder ones or worse ones get terrible blame. So I'm sorry for that, George.
Yeah, indeed, and I am too. Although maybe we should pass the blame elsewhere. You know, maybe the biggest perpetrator at the moment happens to be the United States, who's been spreading it more rapidly than anybody else. But nevertheless,
well, you never know what comes out of the United States, whether it's fake news or real news. But let's just turn to Premier African Minerals a second. I mean, it must be obviously quite frustrating for you at the moment. Very difficult to travel, difficult to go and see all your projects, because of course, as a company, you have numerous projects. But I suppose, you know, one of the things that's interesting about your company is you're exposed to all of these critical metals that are suddenly becoming more and more important. I mean, you've got lithium, you've got nickel, you've got tantalum, you've got tungsten, you've got gold, you've got rare earths, you've got limestone. Where do I stop, George? I mean, you've got a sort of a basket of everything.
yeah, indeed, Andrew, we do, and it is looking much more attractive. I mean, a very good example of that is what's happening with the price of manganese at the moment. We're sitting with a decent stake in a manganese mining operation in Namibia. Sure, Namibia's had a bit of rain, which is quite something for a desert country. And as I said to them, they're replenishing their underground water reserves. So we're not going to run out of mining in the manganese operation. But it's good news that that price is looking good at the moment. The guys there have been clear that they want to have a much closer relationship with Prem than the existing 19%. But you know, we'll just have to see where we go with that. And then on tungsten is another interesting one that our RHA operation in Zimbabwe. There's interest from off-takers, strong interest from off-takers, as I've indicated before. But we're progressing well with some additional test work that we're doing. And we've completed the crushing and milling side of the test work program. We're now busy doing the concentration side of it. And it's looking pretty good. It looks as though we may be able to bring this back into production with a simplified flow sheet and dramatically reduced OPEX. Which is attractive to off-takers. And as I say, a couple of them are talking to us and possibly about funding back into production once we can validate the test results. So there's some...
And it'll have enough sort of production volume, will it, to get them interested?
Yes, indeed it will. Initially going back into production would probably be at the rate of about 6,000 tonne of ore from underground on a monthly basis. But that translates into possibly as much as 3,000, maybe a bit more metric ton units. And yes, that does get people interested, particularly when it's a decent grade concentrate. And historically, RHA was shipping in the 60 to 65% wolframite region. So it's a decent concentrate and it's predominantly wolframite. I mean, RHA could still end up with a new decline shaft being built and bring the XRT back into operation together with it and be much bigger. But that's, I think, a step after we bring the underground back into production first. So, yeah, good news there. And similarly, our communications with the Zimbabweans continue. I know country risk in Zim is a concern worldwide. It was part of the reason why our Zulu Lithium project was originally kind of put on hold to an extent, partly waiting for the EPO, the exclusive prospecting order, to be granted by the Zimbabweans, which we hope is close, partly country risk and partly because of the drop in spodumene prices. But lithium, wow, that's changing.
Yeah, it's taken off completely, isn't it?
Yeah. It has, and there's also an appreciation of the benefits of spodumene, a hard rock spodumene, and particularly the high grade spodumines, low iron, and so on and so forth. And those are things that apply to Zulu. So,
Mhm. And Zimbabwe does. I mean, it has actually a bit of history with lithium, doesn't it? I mean, there is enough there that you could actually make a big success. And everyone's sort of looking to Africa. Who is going to be the first African producer of lithium? Or I mean, there's room for more than one, because as a continent, it really ought to be involved there, shouldn't it?
it should. There are and have been for many, many, many years. Zimbabwe was one of, I think, only two producers of petalite, for example. Um, there are big spodumene deposits floating around in different places. Zulu, I think, is the outstanding spodumene deposit. Other petalite deposits very good as well. So the understanding of lithium, the fact that it exists, the history and so on is there. We just need to get our coordination, as it were, with the mines department, with getting the EPO granted out of the president's office and so on. Just need to get some of those things jacked up, and I think there'll be a big sea change in Zimbabwe.
And George, part of your strategy at Premier African Minerals is to find exciting exploration projects, get them going, and then move them on to partners. I mean, you're not somebody who wants to have a big production mine. How are you finding that at the moment in coronavirus times? Because it's difficult for people to travel and see these things. And are you finding increased interest? Actually, I mean, a lot of people assume it'll be the Chinese because they've been so active in Africa. But a lot of Western countries now are saying we've got to catch up with the Chinese. So are you seeing more activity with people coming saying, hey, look, you've got all these critical metals. Can we come and get partner with you, please?
Yeah, most of the conversation that we tend to have seems to be more European centered, and possibly a little less North American, but not a hell of a lot with potential Chinese investment at this time. I wish there was more, and this is, I'm sure, part of the reason that we have these chats as well. I'd love to find more commonality in terms of where we are in the exploration cycle with some Chinese-based partners, or partners from a different part of the world, as opposed to the European sphere only. I think that's one of the opportunities for Prem. I think that the gold space is going to be very good for some time. I'm quite excited about what we're trying to do in Mozambique. It's not really been regarded as great gold territory, but I think that there's the potential for some good, substantial finds to happen in that part of the world. Similarly, I think there's good potential still in Namibia, and we obviously have an involvement already in the manganese side of Namibia, but doesn't stop us looking elsewhere. And there are some of the African destinations that we're in quite intense discussion with.
Well, it's quite an interesting point that. I mean, Mozambique and Namibia obviously on opposite sides of the country. Namibia, I would deem as a very safe country, very stable. Mozambique's slightly different. I mean, it's quite a slightly unstable, isn't it? But obviously with the Mozambique LNG project now starting to get going, that's a massive piece of infrastructure which could bring a vast amount of money to Mozambique. I know you've spent a lot of time there, George. I mean, how do you see the country developing at the moment? What's your view there?
Look, the Mozambicans have got to bring this insurgency nonsense up in the Cabo Delgado province under control, and I believe they will. I mean, it's not simple; it's fairly complex, but I think that they will, and I think that more equitable involvement of communities overall up in that part of the world is going to help. But you've got to have the projects that drive these things, and you've got to have profitability to be sustainable. And a lot of that underlies, I think, some of the problems, not just in Mozambique, but other parts of Africa as well. is that you've got to be cooperatively profitable to be sustainable. And when you become sustainable, there's a reason for people to avoid ending up in the kind of situation that is happening in Cabo Delgado, for example. So I think that drives part of it. We're much more in the central Zambezi province area. And I'm involved in other interests in that area. We're involved in a fairly substantial other business not associated with Prem. So, you know, I find it fairly easy country to work in. I find that I'm able to communicate with who I need to communicate with. But I would understand others having a lot of bureaucratic difficulty if you ain't used to working in that part of the world. So yeah, you know, that works for us.
Well, look, George, I'll tell you what, it's been great to chat with you. You're looking remarkably chirpy considering we're in this, there's no alcohol being sold in South Africa. I mean, that's not good, but it's a delight to chat to you. You know, Prem's a fascinating stock because it's very, very highly traded. You have a huge following out there. And I'm sure one of these days you're going to have a very exciting find and everything's going to skyrocket. So I'm just looking forward to that day, George.
Oh, me too as well, Andrew. And I think you're right. I think that that's on the cards. So yes.
Well, don't say anything you shouldn't say, George. We'll all just have to wait and keep our fingers crossed for that news coming out. So George, thank you very much for coming onto the China Mining Club. And I'm sure we'll be speaking to you again soon.
Thanks, Andrew. Cheers.